Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vishnu Datta Jairaman. I'm the Communications Director at the Indian American International Chamber of Commerce, IAICC. On behalf of the IAICC and Image India Institute, I welcome you all for this webinar on the impact of digital technology on higher education. We have an eminent panel today, including Professor Jagdish Sheth, Professor Behruz Tetna, and Professor Sanjay Sharma, who will discuss about this important topic in a few minutes from now. We also have Mr. Robinder Sachdev, who will provide the webinar's theme. Without further delay, I would like to introduce Mr. Apan Menon, who is the chairman of the IAICC Executive Board. Mr. Menon has been with the IAICC since 2002 and has functioned in various official capacities. He is a corporate attorney and a partner in the law firm Condon and Forsyth, located in New York City. I now welcome Mr. Menon to give the opening remarks. Mr. Menon, please.
Thank you for the kind introduction, Vishnu. Good afternoon to everybody. Today, as a matter of fact, I am covering our President and CEO, Mr. K.V. Kumar, as he is busy with a conference at the federal government. And let me welcome all of you for today's event organized by Indian American International Chamber of Commerce and Imagine India. I had to specifically welcome a few people. Padma Vibhushan awardee, Professor Jagdish Sheth is a professor of Emory University. Welcome to you, Professor Sheth. Then Professor Setna, President Emeritus of University of West Georgia. Welcome. Then Professor Sanjay Sharma, Vice President, MIT Open Learning. Mr. Robinder Sachdev, President of Imagine India Institute. And of course, our own Narendra Shah and Dr. Gurdeep Kaur Chawla and Dr. Vishnu Datta Jairaman. It's truly an honor to welcome you all and listen to you all and what you have to say about digital technology, how digital technology has made an impact in the higher education. And let me also welcome at this time all the people who are attending this seminar, this event. Now let me sit back and listen to what you had to say, and welcome all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Menon. I would now like to introduce the moderator of today's event, Dr. Gurdeep Chawla, Director, IAICC Executive Board. She is the CEO of Indian Languages Services in Silicon Valley and has spent over 28 years in the field of public diplomacy. As part of her career, she has been involved in interpreting for heads of state in different languages. I now welcome Dr. Chawla to introduce our esteemed speakers and moderate today's event. Dr. Chawla, please.
Thank you, Vishnu, for such a kind introduction. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I know people are joining us from all over the world. So thank you, everybody. And thank you for such a distinguished panel for joining us here. Thank you also to Mr. Robinder Sachdev from Imagine India for co-hosting this seminar. It's my proud privilege to moderate today's session on impact of digital technology in the higher education as chair of Committee on Education with the Indian American International Chamber of Commerce, with legendary figures like Professor Jagdish Sheth, Professor Behruz Setna, and Professor Sanjay Sharma. I will give a little bit of introduction and I will then open the floor to them to introduce themselves a little bit more in detail, followed by my questions. And at the end, we will take questions from the audience who are attending this webinar. Professor Jagdish Sheth is known to everybody. He's a legendary figure, a professor of marketing, or if I may say, a marketing guru at the Business School of Emory. He's a prominent member of the core team during the initial years of Indian Institute of Management, Calcutta, the first Indian Institute of Management. Professor Sheth. I'm sorry, I think the not audible. So let me just start with the introduction with Professor Jagdish Sheth. He's one of our panelists and the main panelist today. He's a professor of marketing, or if I may call, he's a marketing guru. And he's a professor at Emory University, a prominent member of the core team during initial years of the IIM Calcutta and first Indian Institute of Management. Professor Sheth was awarded the Padma Bhushan in 2020 for his work in literature and education in the United States. And most of you know, but if not, I would like to reiterate that recently the IFIM Business School in India gave one of the rarest, the most unique honors to Professor Sheth by renaming themselves as Jagdish Sheth School of Management. What better way to thank him and express our gratitude for all the services he has given to the United States and to India. And we are very grateful that he's joining us today. Our second panelist is Dr. Behrouz Setna. He's the first person of Indian origin to become president of any university in America. And he was the first person of any ethnic minority to become president of college or university in Georgia, other than historically Black college. Dr. Setna is a distinguished alumnus of the two most prestigious higher education institutions in India and Asia, IIT Bombay and IIM Ahmedabad. It is estimated that no more than a handful of people hold those two honors. Dr. Setna's tenure as president, the institution saw transformative changes in the form of from a college to a state university to a PhD degree. And we are very grateful that he's joining us today. And we will be having questions for him soon. Our third and final panelist is Dr. Sanjay Sarma, a professor of mechanical engineering at MIT and vice president for open learning at the institute. He oversees OpenCourseware, MITx, MicroMasters, the new MIT Integrated Learning Initiative and the Jameel World Education Lab at MIT. Without much ado, I would like our panelists to give a little more introduction about themselves so that I can follow up with questions. Professor Jagdish, if you could start.
Sure. Thank you very much, Gurdeep, for a very nice introduction. The only other thing I can add is that I'm an accidental scholar. I was born in Burma, 1938, before World War II, when Japan had the ambition of rolling over and taking over India. They took over Burma. We became refugees and went back to my native place, which is Gujarat and Kutch within Gujarat, the desert area. Surprisingly, of course, I come from a merchant community. My father had gone to settle in Burma in 1916 or some around that time. We were all born in Burma. I'm the youngest. And there's nothing to do back in Kutch. Usually you have a little shop to take care of the villagers who buy things or nearby places. And so it's interesting, coming from a merchant class to become a scholar is a great journey. In fact, I would be less than high school educated, maybe more learning how to speak English or how to speak Gujarati and Hindi, and will be running a shop, earning about 5,000 rupees a month in India, and will be happy because none of us knows our own potential.
True.
We get discovered by others. And when you struggle very hard, which we did about 8 years after coming back, because World War II had shortage of commodities, we had no money. And when you survive a struggle like that, you have an inner character. There's a strength that comes in, which means you can be able to do anything you would like to do, etc., etc. So you begin to work very hard. My transformation took place when I ended up in Chennai. My family settled in Chennai. So I'm a South Indian Gujarati. Interesting combination, right? North and South. And I learned how to speak English, which gave me the mobility to go abroad, etc. And I came in 1961 at University of Pittsburgh as a MBA student, 1-year program, and then I immediately went into a doctoral program, changed from my major, which was accounting in India. I mean, basically, income tax was my major at Loyola College in Chennai, to production management, and eventually, actually, I turned totally around to become a behavioral guy. psychology. My major is behavioral, individual and group behavior. My minor was social psychology. I came into marketing backdoor way by understanding psychology of customers. I'm giving you a long background primarily because if I can do it, anybody else can do it is the point, you know.
That's very, very humble and very inspiring background that you have given us. I'm sure all of our audience, including me, are very, very inspired. May I ask Dr. Behru Setna now a little more introduction?
Thank you, Gurdeep.
Thank you.
I too have a similar story. I grew up in India, family of very modest means. By US standards, it would be considered below the poverty line. But I always consider myself a child of privilege, actually, because my parents had the vision that higher education was the way to the middle class, which was a step above where we were and beyond the middle class. And my father, I remember, even when I was in the 8th standard, telling me that he wanted me not only to go to college, but to go to what at that time was considered the best institution that one could go to, IIT Bombay. And he used to cut out these little ads several years before I could even apply from the newspaper, and he used to carry it with him in his wallet, and he would show it to me from time to time. So I studied very hard. I was by no means a whiz kid of any kind, but through a lot of hard work, applied for IIT and got in. But I really didn't want to go to IIT. I did this just because my dad wanted me to do it. And so I did not get my favored electrical engineering in IIT Bombay. I could get it in other places, and I could get other engineerings in IIT Bombay. So I'm one of those rare cases, and you will have a very low opinion of my intelligence when I tell you this, that I actually turned IIT down. And I came home, and my father was extremely disappointed. And I said, well, my rank was good enough to get anything, but not the one I wanted. So he looked at me and he said, well, next year appear again and try harder, and maybe you will get electrical engineering in Bombay. And I did get a better rank. And this time he did not trust me. He came with me to the interview. And he stood outside the door. And in those days, it used to be a blackboard. When the matrix, a 5x5 matrix, roughly 5 IITs and 5 branches of engineering, and they would put an X mark when something was full. So my rank was high enough such that there were no X marks, and he sort of pulled me close to him and said, there are no X marks on that board. You go in there and take whatever you want, but you get the admission and you come out. In those days, there was no interview or anything. You just. So I did that, and I went to IIT and did reasonably well, not very well, but reasonably well. And by the time that ended, I knew that I didn't want to spend my whole life as an engineer. So I went to IIM Ahmedabad just after that, and then to Columbia University. My point here is that I do believe in my parents' vision that higher education is a transformative experience, and it is the way to great things. So I tell my American students that because they spend a lot of time and energy wondering whether I'm going to college or not. And I said, look, even growing up with that very, very low income, there was never a question mark on the word college. And that is my constant theme. There's no question mark on the word college. You are going to college no matter what sacrifices it took. And it took a lot of sacrifices. And that is it took a lot of sacrifices on the part of my parents and on my part as well, but it was all worth it. And that's my message. So thank you, Gurdeep. I yield the floor. Gurdeep, we can't hear you. We can't hear you, Gurdeep.
I was muted. Yeah. Can you hear me now? Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Professor Setna, for this pulse of wisdom. And if I may now request our eminent panelist, Professor Sanjay Sarma, to give a small introduction, and then we can follow up with the questions.
Thank you very much. Gurdeep, such a pleasure to be here. I should note that regardless of your politics, we have an Indian American now in the White House, and that's something to be proud of. So, and a real testament, because if you look at her journey or her mother's journey, it is a journey not dissimilar to ones we've all witnessed or perhaps ourselves traversed. So my name, as Gurdeep said, is Sanjay Sarma. I am an IIT Kanpur graduate. My wife is an IIT Kanpur graduate. We met there. I got into IIT. I have no excuses. I come from a very well-educated family. Mine is not an inspiring story. I actually find what Behrouz said and Jagdish said very inspiring. I had everything going for me. But when I got into IIT, frankly, I realized that college was designed to pass exams. And in the world today, you need to do.
Yeah.
And college has to be reorganized to enable doing. So when I graduated from IIT Kanpur, and I wasn't a terribly good student, I went to work out in the North Sea on an oil rig, just because I wanted to get away from college, really do. And were it not for a minor accident I had there, I would have remained in the working world. But as it turned out, I then went to CMU, UC Berkeley, joined my wife, actually. She got a PhD in UC Berkeley as well. And I've been at MIT for 25 years. Now, my journey to MIT is also sort of interesting in the sense, I'll just say one more thing, is that at MIT, as a faculty member, you have a lot more freedom. You can focus your research on what you really want to do. And I wanted to teach in a way that I really wanted to have been taught. By the way, my IIT Kanpur professors are really great. In fact, I just spoke to a couple of them, very wonderful people. It was really on the environment and the structure in India. And at Open Learning at MIT, we do a number of things, including online learning. I actually just wrote a book about it that Jag knows about, called GRASP. And what I think is the revolution that we're going to go through over the next few years. And the point I'll make is that the 21st century begins in 2021. It did not begin in 2001. 2001 was a continuation of the 20th century. Something is changing. We as society are spending a year retraining in a new reality. And in this new world, education has to change. And the focus has to be not on passing exams. There's nothing wrong with exams. We need exams. But about transforming students to become successful as the CEOs of their own lives in the world that we're going to leave for them. So I think that's a challenge, and I hope that education will rise to it. Thank you. Back to you, Gurdeep.
Thank you so much, Professor Sarma. This was so inspirational, and I love the quote that you gave, that the 20th century begins 2021. I fully agree with you there, and that's something that I wanted to say myself. So let's open the floor now to the questions that I have in mind, and then we'll follow with the audience that will keep sending us questions. So if Professor Sheth, if I may have the honor to ask you, with the US election results just poured in, and we all know the 46th president coming up now and the new administration probably taking over soon. What do you think? How will the new administration look at accelerating higher education, and what are some of the quick steps that US and India can take to open up the US university campuses in India? Because India, as you know, has come up with a new education policy, the NEP policy. How will the two be blended there? What is your vision about that?
The strategic relationship between India and America started actually in the 90s, has been evolving over time to build up mutual trust, etc. And then more recently, it has accelerated quite a lot from a security viewpoint first, then from an economic viewpoint, and ultimately from an educational viewpoint. And I'll talk about that in a moment. It is accelerated recently with China expanding in the South China Sea or the Asia or Pacific Ocean. And that has been creating a huge anxiety between India as well as Asian nations. So there's a formation of a military alliance to counterbalance China. I call it Cold War 2.0 in many ways. between China and America. So you have Australia, you have Japan, you have India now joining it, and America going to increase its membership, like a NATO evolution that happened after World War II. So that's clearly a key strategic alignment, which means no matter who came as a president in America, it did not matter. India will benefit in the process in this bilateral engagement.
True.
Second reason where education comes in is much more strategic. As the world is digitizing, as Sanjay just mentioned, from a technology viewpoint, 21st century begins in 2021. There's a huge transformation of everything we do. Our individual lives that we run, for example, which is social media, internet-based. Corporations are digitally transforming themselves, which immediately creates a demand for, just like in the last century, demand for automobiles and machines and appliances, demand for technology, and there is not enough talent to provide and satisfy the demand on a global basis, which is why we expect that all of the technology companies will be in search of the talent pool, and the largest nation with largest talent pool in terms of technical competency is India. There are pockets in Eastern Europe, clearly. There are pockets, of course, China is a big one, but China will not be allowed to participate. So we think Silicon Valley type companies, not just in America, but surprisingly from Japan, surprisingly, in fact, from Europe, which have some very good silicon type companies, they will all come to India to invest in the companies in India to have the talent on their side. They will be the largest employers in India out of nowhere. Accenture is already the largest one in IT services. If you look at the accounting firm Ernst & Young, it employs 50,000 people in one location in Hyderabad alone. Deloitte is coming in management, all the 4 accounting firms. So that is where it is the students out there and getting the students to work for not only Indian or enterprises, but also multinationals is the true bilateral relationship. And there, US will have a larger share of that issue than any other country pretty much. So that's where the education will come in. More investment by American universities to go to India. I'm sorry to belabor the point, but at the same time, coincidentally, the new national education policy enables this quite a lot. Reduces all of the barriers, regulation-wise, to encourage and allow foreign universities to come to India and have campuses there, not just programs, is a major change. I will elaborate a little more later on once you go around with other questions. There's
Wonderful.
a noise coming. There's a noise coming.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. Thank you.
Yeah. Now you're off. There's a
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Jagshed, for these enlightening views on this topic. And if I may ask our next panelist, Professor Behrooz Shetna, about what is the campus life, or the campus ultimately destined to? Do you think that the campus is ultimately destined to disappear with the new 5G age and, afterwards as important centers for technology and advancement of knowledge? Do you think the campus will disappear soon? I mean, the basic question everybody keeps asking is why would any parent or, why would we want to spend millions of dollars on our children for higher education in Ivy League or such Stanfords and, Berkeleys of the world when the entire study program is actually available at far off distance at a fraction of a price? What are your views on that?
Good question, Gurdeep. Thank you for that question. I am a strong believer in the value of online education. I believe it has a very clear role in today's society. I'm not convinced at all that strong role will cause the traditional campus to disappear. In fact, Peter Drucker is credited for saying something on those lines. I think he said probably it was about 30 years ago that he predicted that 30 years from then, which is about now, that traditional campuses would cease to exist, and that hasn't happened. Let me sort of put this in perspective. Online education is very important. It's a growing market. It's a booming market.
Yes.
it has clear needs and roles that it meets. For example, graduate education. Graduate education for people who are in jobs and so on, they can't take necessarily 2 years out to 2 years out of their lives to do an MBA or to do something else. Very clear role that that's an important way that they could meet their educational objectives. That requires some maturity, some sacrifice and so on their part, and they can do it. And so online education is extremely important. Online education also helps the non-traditional undergraduate student, the working mother who dropped out of college or who didn't even go to college to raise a family. And now that the kids are able to handle their education or they're on their own or they have left home, she, being a very intelligent person, wants to go and complete what she started. There again, online education is great. It is right on target. But I also live in another world, which is while it is a reducing market share, it is still a very large proportion of the market. And that is the traditional age student who, and of course, they're traditional age students of all calibers and kinds. And Dr. Sarma will see an exceptional student at MIT, and so will Dr. Sheth at Emory. I'm very proud of my own university, the University of West Georgia. When I came to West Georgia, it was a college. In my 19 years of presidency, I saw it grow from a college to a state university and then to a full-blown university, doctoral granting, what we call in the trade a SACS level 6 institution. Level 6, incidentally, is the highest level in the Southeast because SACS is a Southern Accreditation Board. Emory, for example, is level 6, Georgia Tech is level 6, and so are we. So I've seen that transition happen. Yet, I have to be very realistic. The students that we get are not the caliber of MIT students or Emory students. They come sometimes diffident about their own success and sometimes from impoverished backgrounds. And it is a great joy and a feeling of satisfaction to see them grow from something below the middle class to creating a middle class. So I presided over commencement ceremonies for 19 years, and I used to do something a little unusual. So at every commencement ceremony, at the end of it, you praise the students and you ask them to stand and everyone applauds and so on. And they rise and we applaud their accomplishments. But I used to use that phenomenon for another process as well. I used to talk to the audience and said, what you saw just now is the physical manifestation of the creation of a middle class. You suddenly saw students who came from non-middle class backgrounds rise, and that's a physical creation of the middle class. That's what we've done. So I'm extremely inspired by that thing that institutions like we do. But the process of getting there is painful because these students require a lot of personal attention. They require some hand-holding. They require me, because I teach a very advanced statistics-based course in marketing. It requires me to bend over their shoulders and to physically show them how to do SPSS or to show them how to massage data. And they're confused and they are scared of statistics. And it requires a great deal of personal attention. So I'm making the case that face-to-face education will not go away, not for the student who needs more help. Now, I'm again, in COVID, I'm still teaching face-to-face classes this semester, but I have had to put every session of mine online and upload these lectures so the student who cannot come to class can still get the benefit. So obviously I'm proud of my own work, but I do not believe that it's the same thing. I do not believe for the diffident student, for the scared student, for the student who does not have the level of preparation that Dr. Sarma and Dr. Sheth are used to, that requires some extra help. I do not believe that that market is going to disappear, not at all. I do not believe, to move to a lighter end of things, that the desire for a climbing wall at a university campus or the desire for athletics is going to go away either. The 18-year-old mind has not completely changed. It has changed in little pieces, but since March of this year, the desire for a climbing wall has not gone away. And so that kind of thing will continue. And before I close, I just want to share with you one set of data. When I became president of what then was West Georgia College in 1994, we were already a very vibrant residential college. We had students in residence. And there's a sort of a measure, a surrogate measure of the extent of full-time education on a campus. And that is, it's called, sorry for the technical term that non-academics would not appreciate, it's all called full-time equivalent student. So this is if the students taking credit hours were lumped into a full-time equivalent, what would that be? So I computed a ratio of full-time equivalent versus headcount, divided by headcount. And that was already a very high ratio when I came. I'm going to share my screen with you in a moment, and that's what it is. So I came in 94. This chart starts at 2000 because that's when we started doing great things at the University System of Georgia. I was doing an interim position as Senior Vice Chancellor then, and we started something called eCore, which is the whole core curriculum online. And so at that point, West Georgia was at 92.5%. Use this ratio as an indication of how residential we were or how full-time we were. One would imagine that this number would go down. In my remaining time, it kept going up. And you see, for those of you technically inclined, an R-square of 0.84 almost. And it went up when I finished my presidency, it was at 94%. Wow. Through all the exciting things we were doing in online education, and we at one point accounted for more eCore enrollment, again, this was eCore is the core curriculum online, than any other University System of Georgia institution. And of course, that includes Georgia Tech, University System of Georgia, and so on. So this is the kind of thing we did. But while we were doing that, this was going up and up and up. So that is the point I want to say. I don't want anyone to think of online education as an either or. You can do both. You can do awesome things with online education, as I'm proud to say that we did, and still you can have a residential experience for your students. So it's not an either or, to my mind.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Setna. And what better way to summarize it than what you just said, that during your commendation you say what you saw just now is a physical manifestation of a middle class. And I totally agree with you that how you've helped so many students coming from lower middle class or the not so middle class to upper middle class, and fulfilling the dreams of their parents. And I'm one of them. I've fulfilled my parents' dream, going through such education systems, although I was in Delhi University, St. Stephen's College, and got the best education I could. And I'm very grateful for the education that professors like you and Professor Sheth and Professor Sarma are giving us. So Professor Sarma, my question now to you, because you are a pioneer in promoting remote learning much before COVID times. You've been a pioneer in remote learning and going ahead with that. I want to shift gears a little bit here. And I know, like as Professor Setna said, it cannot be either or. It has to be a hybrid, right? So some part of remote learning, some part of in-person learning. I think that will be the best blend, as I understand. But question is, what's the long-term future of college degrees anyways? I mean, that's a question that most parents are asking. I'm a parent myself, and I ask, we are sending our students to colleges for higher education, spending millions of dollars. And when, big 500 fortunes are hiring candidates without any college education. You see the Facebooks of the world, the Googles, the Twitters of the world. They are hiring students, hiring candidates without any college degree. So is there any purpose, left for that kind of higher education, or is it just a degree, a piece of paper, as people say? What's the real competence of a person? Is it visible in direct ways? What do you say?
Yeah, no, thank you. I just want to pick up where Professor Setna left off. And I just want to say that if you're willing to fly in a plane and the pilot did everything online, that day you can be ready for online education.
Very good analogy.
Or if you're going to go go into a surgery and the surgeon did everything.
I must say, yeah.
Okay.
That's great.
So that's an excellent analogy. Excellent analogy.
So let's wait for that day. Now, the other thing I'll say is that I think precisely to what Professor Setna said, online is absolutely not it's not a dichotomy. It's a false dichotomy. In fact, online makes in-person even better, because rather than the professor sort of blathering on and wasting classroom time, you can do what he described, which is coach, look over the shoulder, I mean, Michelangelo never attended a lecture, right? It was all coaching. There's a great book about it actually called Peak, the Science of Expertise. It shows the power of coaching. So I just want to say that. Now, the second thing I'll say is, are degrees necessary? Again, actually, I'll pick up on something that actually Professor Shet said earlier, and then Professor Setna just said. The human brain, with this part of the human brain, where we put a bindi or a tilak, and in many cultures we point here, right? Medha, etc., etc. So this is the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex grows up to age 21, 22. That's why we don't let people drink or drive, etc. We have various constraints, although we send them to war because, ironically, maybe for the same reason. Now, the prefrontal cortex, the formation of the prefrontal cortex, in my view, has to happen residentially and has to be holistic. You want to give people exposure to the climbing wall, to history, to geography, to philosophy, to debate, and of course, to skills like learning to program, or I was very struck by the coefficient of determination that Professor Setna and a statistician put in his graph, because the R squared, because, so it's sort of a fundamental thinking. Now, I don't want my kid to not get a full undergraduate degree. The problem with the corporations that are offering the quick certificate is they only care about the first job. We have a societal responsibility to prepare people for life.
Yes.
And that is the contrast. Now, does that mean that degrees will survive? Absolutely. Does it mean that there'll be more certificates? Absolutely. Again, I don't think it needs to be a dichotomy. For those who can get a degree, I would say, unequivocally, get the degree. That is the best thing you can do, because by age 21, 22, when your prefrontal cortex is formed, you will be ready for life. For those who can't, well, get the certificate, it's your first job, and hopefully you will have the opportunity to do other things and broaden your horizons, and maybe you can get the second job. But, I think we have a sacred responsibility to prepare the person for life. It's sort of like, maybe I'll leave you with this analogy. Imagine if you were training someone to play basketball. Well, you just teach them to jump more than anything else. I mean, I'm not trying to diminish basketball. It needs a lot of skills, dribbling, right? But if you're training someone for a sport undecided yet, it's a very different training. You teach them aerobic, give them aerobic exercise, anaerobic exercise, interval training, core strength, flexibility, because you don't know, are they going to play basketball? Are they going to play tennis? Are they going to play, something else? Squash? Are they going to be a shot putter? Very different. And I think the difference between what a university does and a university degree does and what a certificate from, say, Google does, Google decides you're going to be a shot putter and trains you for that. A university degree prepares you for an unknown sport. So I'll just stop there.
Great. Very good.
That was a great analogy, Dr. Sarma. I totally agree with you on that. University degree definitely prepares you for a lifetime. I'll come back to Professor Jagdish Shet. where we left, I want to actually know what will equip our students to be well prepared for the opportunities that you see coming up. Are there any particular courses that should be added in our academics, or
Yeah.
and I'm here talking both about India and United States in view of the NEP, which you have, analyzed at length, I know. Is there any particular coursework, any particular courses that should be included? And if so, what?
Yeah. Well, excellent question. Thank you. First of all, half-life of knowledge is getting shorter and shorter. Software is down to a year and a half, 18 months. Whatever you learned in software is obsolete in 18 months, or half-life is that. Management is also down to about 18 months. Whatever we learned and whatever we taught 2 years ago is obsolete. New knowledge is coming at a speed, which means there is no some such thing as learning as a termination, whether you give a certificate or you give a degree. It's a lifelong learning. And this is what universities are allowed to figure out, how to do lifelong learning and still be economically viable. So my fundamental view is that, especially in the US system, why should we have a graduation with a degree and we call them alums? Is it possible for private universities, especially, to have a lifelong fee? You jack up the fee twice what you pay. Let's say private university is $50,000. You say $100,000, and we'll continuously educate you. So you calculate the lifetime value of a student and his learning and investment in that in a positive way. Over time, you don't know the dynamics of the world, where it's going. So learning after graduation, which is foundational in many ways, can be totally adaptive to the environment. Nobody knew about COVID impact on society, not just the economic impact. We can improvise and create courses dynamically to constantly make them align with the ecosystem in which they exist. That's one point. I do want to make a second point. We have created unnecessary discipline boundaries. Marketing does not talk to finance, for example. Business school does not talk to humanities. Humanities does not talk to social sciences. Engineering is by itself. I think that what is going to happen both by policy in India, especially with the new policy document, and I'll go a little more, but it's happening around here. Technology is breaking those boundaries much faster, especially the recent technologies that we never imagined. Let me give you one more area, and I'm sorry to belabor the point. I have come out with a framework that in the pre-industrial age, learning took place with a spoken language. And there were 3 C's of learning. You learned the craft under a master person, many years as an apprentice, and you came out with a gadget. You were a goldsmith, you were an ironsmith, whatever you were. Learning came from the community. Community taught you quite a lot, second C. And the third C is what I call church, faith, congregation. Actually, I use the word congregation rather than a faith. So congregation gave you all the knowledge about how to cope with the reality of the time, and you stayed local. You were born and brought up, and you will die in that community. That's it. Now comes the industrial age, where we change that by focusing on literacy, what I call 3 R's of learning: reading, writing, and arithmetic. And that's how we created literacy, which is necessary in the factory, to work in the factory rather than work in the community or in the farm, where literacy was not necessary. Industrial age, so we talked about learning, which is still not true. In the digital age, we have to change to what I call 3 I's of learning. How can you make learning interactive? Which means it's not just my taking the lecture and taking notes, but I can counterbalance by arguing or whatever interaction. So interactive is one. Learning should be integrated, which was the main point I was making. There is something in common between music and mathematics. We have divided the world to say you are a right brain or you are a left brain. That's absolutely nonsense. Why? Because at a meta level, mathematics and music are both languages. Computer science is a language also. So there has to be some commonality, just as a scientist, one would expect that. So integration of knowledge is very important. Here is the reason: most innovation comes by connecting the dots. not staying within a silo and improving or breakthrough, but connecting the dots which are totally unconnected by the rest of the society. And you figure out, so the more holistic education you have, the better off you are, just as a comment. So integration is very important, which technology enables you to do. And the third thing is that the learning has to be individualized more and more. To comment based upon Meru Setna's comment, the diversity of people wanting to go to college is so enormous. Like, it is not weeded out by, let's say in India, 10 only, 10 years of college, 10 plus 2 kind of a stuff, or ours is a high school where you don't want to be a college. Today, everybody has to go to college to earn beyond minimum wages. So individualization will be more necessary, which you may not be able to do in the classroom, but you can do it through technology. We call it mass personalization or mass customization. So this is the commonality why technology will enable us to go from the industrial age to the digital or the knowledge age with 3 eyes of learning. Now, if you have a time, I would like to get back to what is going to happen in India with the new policy, because I think policy in India will drive technology. Mm-hmm. Technology has been driving the policy, but now in India, policy will drive, and I think we need to have come. I can talk about it, but later on, after one more round with my colleagues.
Thank you so much, Professor Seth, for pointing at the 3 C's and the 3 I's. I'm sure there's a lot of integration that can be done, at this point. My next question would be to Professor Behrooz. How do you think, how should the coaching styles change in the new era, in the sense that, as you mentioned regarding the students that come to the college, how would we coach them to make it more effective?
Well, I will respond taking off from Dr. Sarma's point. He made an excellent point that it has to be, you have to have your hands on. That's why, for example, in my course, 50 to 60% of the grade is for an applied project. Now, I do teach them the statistics. So there is the traditional, what I call loosely sage on the stage. I am talking to them, I am teaching them statistics and so on, giving them, but then the bulk of the course is using that stuff to actually do something. We do a project for a business or for an entity, and they collect data, and then I teach them how to analyze. So the doing is the important thing. Mm-hmm. So I think that, and I actually make, and I think about a week away from that, when I make a dramatic announcement in class, which throws them off a bit. I say, and I'm actually planning to do this on Wednesday, and if I miss that deadline, I will do it the following Monday, that I put a picture of some keys up on the screen, and I say, today is a very significant day because I'm turning over the management of the course to you. These are the keys to the car. You are now going to drive the car. I am transitioning officially from a sage on the stage to a guide on the side. And I make that point saying, now you're in charge. I am just going to be there as a consultant to help you. And it throws them off because they're so used to, I'm doing this. Even during the applied phase, I'm pretty much driving the agenda. And all of a sudden, I'm not. And so that is a dramatic event that happens. So again, coaching style, I think to go outside the realm of what we're talking about strictly. Coaching style can be done well in technology, enhanced learning, as well as face-to-face learning. And one has to be concerned about how you do it. Now, let me be honest with you. I enjoy the dynamic interaction of face-to-face education. The students enjoy it, and I enjoy it too. I am confessing that. I like to perform, okay? I'm being very honest with that. I walk around the class. I'm not geared tight to my computer station. I actually write things on the board still. So in fact, I typically teach back-to-back classes. And by lunchtime, I've made my 10,000 steps because on my Fitbit, because I'm just running around the class and helping them and looking over their shoulder and so on. So In fact, I said, after a break, after like Thanksgiving or in non-COVID times, after the Thanksgiving break or after the Christmas break, I actually say to my colleagues, I'm glad to be back in the classroom because now I don't have to worry about my 10,000 steps anymore. It'll happen, just happen automatically. So I think it's the coaching style has to be individual. It has to be individualized. Absolutely right, Dr. Shet. It has to be individualized for the student, but it also has to be a good fit with the faculty member, and that's why this is so interesting. And there are so many different learning styles, and there's so many different faculty styles. And I'm comfortable with that. I'm comfortable with the diversity of learning styles and teaching styles. And so long as you keep in mind that your objective is to develop the mind of the student, that's the important thing. Again, to take off what Dr. Sarma says, I'm going to show you a quote that I find absolutely fascinating and a bit scary. So this is from Secretary Riley. Dr. Sharma was absolutely right. Universities are not in the business of teaching you for your first job. It's not a training institution. We are currently preparing students for jobs that don't yet exist. This is so important, that using technologies that haven't been invented. And this third one is really fascinating. In order to solve problems that we don't even know yet. We don't know these problems. I don't know what problems the world will face, or even my industry will face, even 10 years from today, let alone 40 years from today, which is their lifetime of education. I don't know the problems. So I have to train the mind rather than just train you for a job. So I want to leave that thought with you, saying the task that we face is so exciting, a little bit scary, and therefore our styles have to go with that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for enlightening us on that. Now, Professor Sarma, if I may ask you, you mentioned regarding holistic thinking, and Professor Jack Shate also talked about the left brain and the right brain dichotomy, that's a fallacy. How can such an integrated connecting of the dots in the minds of students be enabled via digital? Any thoughts on that?
I mean, I've always said that, let me put it to you this way. I think that the best way to connect the dots is in person. By the way, I mean, in my book, I talk about the science of learning. And here's another analogy. We as human beings are designed to learn. We are immature to some extent until we're in our early 21, 18, that because of the prefrontal cortex, and that makes us very adaptable. Mm-hmm. So the way we learn is a human prerogative. We are designed to learn, and we're also designed to teach. It's called parenting. Parents teach, right? That's how we transmit knowledge. That's why we're so incredibly, as I said, adaptable. Now, I have no doubt that the best way to connect the dots is in person with an expert, the guide on the side, as Professor Setna said, mm-hmm. The integrated learning that Professor Chet said. There is no better way to do it than in person. Having said that, it's a matter of scale, and can we reach a lot of people, and especially when people are working, whether they're a parent, can they have access to that level of in-person education, which is a luxury that many can't afford. I think that over time, we will find that digital education will up its game and get there. It's not there yet, right? So it means, for example, last year we've been training to do conferences like this. And now there's a whole generation that's growing up able to use Google Docs and Microsoft Teams and do very collaborative things, right? And that is dot connecting. You may have one student in neuroscience and one in engineering working on a wearable, or I don't know, people with Alzheimer's, right? And so I think we will get there. The problem, though, is that in this environment that we're in, it's still a little bit one-dimensional. You know, I can't go to the whiteboard conveniently and draw something. I can't shape something out of clay and say, listen, this is how it'll look. I can't 3D print something and pass it to you. So it's still limited. But I do think that over time, online will get there. But I'll end with this thought. Online is going to get better and better and better. People are throwing money at it. They're entrepreneurs. It's technology, augmented reality, VR, all that stuff is going to take off. The challenge for universities is, I think they can do things online can't do, but they have to wake up to that reality and reach for the stars. And when I say reach for the stars, it's not just a simple word. I think we need to think of students as potential superstars and figure out how we can become the coaching transformative entities that take the raw material that we get and turn them into superstars. And that doesn't mean, next Elon Musk or, next someone else. I mean, actually, I'm very moved by what Professor Setna said about the middle class, creating them, having them arise middle class. You are now successful and able contributors to society. And I think that is a transformation universities, I don't think have woken up to. I think they think it's back to business, and it isn't.
Thank you so much. Thank you for those enlightening views. Professor Sarma, I'm very grateful to you. Professor Jagdish Sheth, I think you had some more views, but we were waiting for more questions to come up. Anything that you wanted to contribute that I have not asked so far?
Yeah, there are maybe 3 different areas and points I'll make. For the first time, by technology at least, if not by policy, know-how meets know-why. We somehow believe that you go to college to know why, a theory, which you can replicate lots of things with, an explanation, not just a description. But I think for the first time, knowledge will be blended from know-how and know-why. We need both of them.
Yes.
And we call it experiential learning, for example. In many disciplines which are more clinical, it is blended both ways. Medicine, for example, engineering to some extent. Social sciences don't do a good job. So we have to think about different disciplines where the know-how meets know-why. Second area I see, especially in the advanced economies, would be rise of non-traditional universities. And I'm watching that as a trend. I've been talking about it for 2 decades, non-traditional competition. This is I clearly see, just like Wikipedia came to displace the typically encyclopedia, knowledge is continuously updated by a collective effort. I see the rise of Wikipedia University, which will offer degrees, certificates, and they'll be accepted by accreditation bodies. Accreditation bodies would like to protect the institutions because they are their members, which is where they do development. But just like the University of Phoenix came out of nowhere, multiple campuses, 250,000 students, larger than any large campus, and shook up the world of traditional campus-based educations. So I see the rise of Wikipedia universities, and they'll be funded by companies like YouTube. YouTube is very capable. In fact, if you look at the current way, many of the how-to is people go to YouTube to figure out how to fix my backyard, how to do this, how to do cooking, and world-class content is coming from well-known user-generated content as opposed to academic content. So that's a very key one. Third one is very important, namely that there will be online education for access and reach. The fixed cost of doing education brick and mortar is so high, especially in medicine, which is the highest it looks like, because the equipment that you need, and also, in fact, in engineering, management and humanities is low fixed cost industry. More fixed cost industry, the greater the reach you need for affordability, scale, economies, etc. So for example, in the process, today I can reach students all over the world in an engineering class if I have a world-class professor. So boundaries drop that, as it is happening, by the way, for your information. We are doing it in piano, professors of music, and they are now going online using Coursera as a platform, and edX is the other platform that Sanjay is involved. And they are reaching students who actually from a few students in the classroom, they're getting 10,000 students at a time. I can amortize my cost quite a lot. So that's very key area. There are remote places, even in America, where education is not accessible.
Mm-hmm.
Now in India, this is more dramatic because you have the whole platform created by government called Swayam. 5,000 colleges, all in smaller towns. The problem is not the physical structure is obsolete, but the college teacher is obsolete. Knowledge is moving so fast, he or she has no idea. So how can you bring a world-class knowledge created by contemporary experts, futurist even, for example, and bring it to the masses? Swayam now has 5,000 colleges, just in management alone using edX platform. IIM Bangalore just crossed this year 1 million students in management.
Wow, that is amazing.
Never imagined. And by the way, they reach not only India through that platform, but they reach the world. So this again, world is flat concept is going to emerge. Who says that the advanced countries with well reputations like MIT, like Harvard, like Cambridge, like, whatever they are, Uppsala, I can give you the names, are the only ones who generate knowledge and disseminate knowledge. An emerging market university can today as good a job, almost as good a job as anybody else. So to me, that egalitarianism or democratization of knowledge creation is more likely to happen with this technology than ever before. We have been very elitist. In higher education, we have been more elitist as professors.
Yes.
Not only as students. And I think this drops that whole from a elitism to more and more democratization of knowledge creators. So I see that flattening of the curve happening sooner in many of the early science, like say chemistry, etc. Today, you have world-class professors from India contributing to top journals. In management, we dominate actually. So those are the three things I'll talk about. And if we have the time, I will add some more specific to India.
Thank you so much. I know we can go on and we could probably have 2 or 3 more such sessions. You have so much to contribute, all three of you. It's so wonderful. I just cannot stop. We are almost reaching the hour, and I want to also invite our audience. If they have any questions, they can start typing in the chat and we can look at them. In the meanwhile, I can ask a question from Professor Behruz. How will you imagine a university in 10 years from now? Say a mid-sized college or a university of tomorrow?
Good. Again, very good question. I think that if you look back at what has happened 10 years, in the past 10 years in technology, you would realize that there are many things that we could not have predicted would happen today. And so I want to offer the same humility in my prediction. Basically, the answer is, I don't know, because the technology is, looking back and looking forward 10 years, you sort of make that parallel. We could not have predicted, well, of course, some of this has come through COVID, true, but we could not have predicted all of this happening. And so, again, we have to exercise a great deal of humility in our 10-year predictions. Right. But I certainly believe that technology, of course, will advance, and it will advance at a very rapid rate. Dr. Sarma laid some of the things down that maybe they will be in the next 10 years, a way to, in fact, create things on my computer and have it duplicated on yours, so you can actually touch and feel something. That could happen with 3D printers and so on. But I think the interesting challenge for us is how to use high technology for high touch. If we can do that, that would be awesome. So let us, by all means, push technology, and let us see if we can't make that a more personal experience. Yes. Let me give you an example. Going back in time, I was one of the earlier users of email and the earlier avid users of email. And
AOL time. AOL times.
I was criticized by some of my faculty colleagues saying, I mean, students don't particularly, how do you communicate with students with email? Shouldn't it be more personal in your communication and so on? And this was the example I gave them. Now I'm going back in time quite a bit. I would say, with this, students can ask me questions at 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 2 a.m., and so on. This, I mean, I actually had this sort of thing that played out the night before a test. A very good student in my class wrote me an email saying, "I'm done with the assignment problems. Give me more." And that excites me because I don't hear that very often. Yes. Give me more. And so I created at 10 p.m. a set of more intellectually stimulating ones. And of course, I know what's going to be on the test tomorrow morning, so I can feed him that kind of problem. And then he solved them and sent them back to me, around midnight. And then we were talking through that. Now it was an 8 a.m. class. So finally we both said we need to stop because otherwise we'll be completely zombie-like in the morning. And obviously he aced the test. So this is an example that could never happen without technology. No professor is going to be in his or her office at midnight, and no student is going to come. It would be kind of a dangerous situation anyway. So we were able to create high touch through high tech. And I think as we go beyond that, that would be the challenge. It would be awesome to see that.
Thank you. Thank you indeed, Professor Sarma. Now, I am getting a lot of questions and a lot of appreciation for all the concepts that you've discussed, especially the know-how, from moving from know-why to know-how and all the other concepts. So wonderful to hear and read all these wonderful comments from our audience. I'll take the first question I'm getting for Dr. Sanjay Sarma and Professor Jag Said. It is from Hemant Vyas in Atlanta. He's asking, why just limit to cross-discipline coordination amongst departments? How about coordination across universities, industries, such that you can learn from experts of your own choice on a given topic? Do you see such an open environment?
Sanjay.
If you can start.
Yes, I'll just say a couple of words, and I'll say that's what the edXs of the world, the Coursera's of the world do right away. I mean, basically, you can take a course from, from Emory on actually great work on vaccinations and virology, and then you can take a course on public health from Harvard. I mean, essentially what's happening is that these online platforms have become sort of superstores for education, and so you can certainly do that. You can also, in principle, take a course from MIT and one from the Linux Foundation, on how to program an operating system. So I think we're headed in that direction. I don't know what you think, Professor Sheth, but I think this is partly the future.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it will be enabled more by policy change. This is the key foundation of national education policy, which says if you earn credit from one institution, it is counted toward other institution. No boundaries, and student can even stop and go, which I am not so sure. Like I can do 1 or 2 years and then I stop for 3 years and then those credits are counted, which means you have a lifelong degree granting, which I don't think is a good idea, but it allows you that flexibility. So I totally agree. There always have been cooperation on research side between institutions. That is how the NSF came in, the internet came in, etc. There has been cooperation in a city. Harvard and MIT cooperate on a bunch of things. Georgia Tech and Emory cooperate quite well. If you go to Chapel Hill area, Duke and UNC Chapel Hill and North Carolina State University, they cooperate. Cities have learned, Stanford and Berkeley cooperate. I can give you examples. But universities at one time were organized to be isolated, away from the city.
Yes.
Great universities are always away from the city.
Definitely.
City, like Chicago, city may have encroached south side, but it was isolated when it was formed. Uppsala is the best example. I've gone there. It is isolated. Most campuses are isolated pretty much in the process because then you create a community which is all about the same activities you have to do, like the old guilds in many ways. So how do you have isolated campuses get connected? It is through technology and policy. Again, I would strongly say our biggest problem often is accreditation policies, as well as the state universities having their own regulations. But you can create enormous synergies like we do Georgia Tech and Emory. There's a bioengineering program that is now 5 years. It's now ranked #1. You start with Georgia Tech, then you come to Emory to learn biology because we are a medical school essentially.
Correct.
They are in engineering, so it's very possible.
Awesome. Let me take another question now coming from Professor Kavita Thaplial. And she's saying that innovation has become one of the buzzwords in education and industry in recent years. I would love to know from the eminent panel their inputs on how to bridge the academia and industry gaps in technological revolutionized world. Any one of you, Professor Bedus, maybe you can start?
Yeah.
Say the question again. I'm sorry, I missed it.
Yes,
Missed all the nuances of it.
Innovation has become one of the buzzwords in education and industry in recent years. I would love to know from eminent panel their inputs on how to bridge the academia and industry gaps in technological revolutionized world.
And if Kavita means that the bridge the gap between industry and academe, then I think that we are doing that. We are already doing that fairly well. With deference to Dr. Sheth's point about being isolated, there are, I think all universities today have realized that they can't do that, that's not a workable model in today's day. So they're already working on bridging those gaps. We do that in a variety of ways, both high tech and low tech. We have advisory boards of institutions. The way that I like to do it is having my students do applied projects that are of interest to the business community, for example. So this is already going on. I come back to that word I used in my last response, a bit of humility. A bit of humility goes a long way. A humility to realize that, I'm a professor, I have a PhD, I'm an expert in this, I've published all these papers, but I don't know it all. That's the thing, the humility to say, heck, I may be considered to be an expert in my field. By the way, I'm not talking about myself, I'm talking about the other two panelists, but I may be considered to be an expert in my field, but there's still a lot to learn. And I'm going to learn that from every every source possible, including industry. Again, how to make this more relevant to my student. Again, going back to something I said earlier, if the focus is helping the student succeed over the next 40 years, at least 40-year period, maybe 50, because they graduate at the age of, say, 22 from a bachelor's program, they will easily be working till the age of 72. So it's foolish to believe that it's anything less than a 50-year span. And we cannot, in effect, teach them the technology for the next 50 years because we don't know it and it hasn't been invented yet and the problems haven't been invented yet. But what we can do is give them the excitement and the ability to learn how to learn. And again, the humility to realize that they don't know it all and we don't know it all. So that would be my response.
Thank you. Thank you. There's tons of questions. Thank you for asking that question. Thank you so much, Dr. Bedus, for this wonderful insight on that. Lots and lots of questions. Sorry, Professor Sheth.
Let me add something to the comment that Bedus made, which is very valuable. Generally, the best way to create innovation is to have the industry and the academic having joint research. For example, Bell Labs always led in innovation. They generated Nobel Prize winners, just like any university. Many of the Bell Labs professors were on Princeton University. They were comparable. Motorola Labs, where I worked at all these labs. GM Tech Center is as world-class in what they do in terms of innovation as any university in terms of automotive-related research. But more than that, We have worked on that. 400 people over there. The division that I was an advisor to, everybody had a PhD from different disciplines, from economics to psychology to engineering to whatever it is, and then social policy and all that. I think we have underestimated that IBM Labs is world class. Xerox Lab was world class. And of course, now the newer Silicon Valley social media companies all are having world class laboratories. It's a question of how do you somehow integrate the two together. And we do have the National Science Foundation, NIH, for example, which are grant giving agencies to create a commonality between scientists no matter where they are housed. That's clearly one to increase the innovation. In India, this is the weakest link. Because India corporations came from trading companies. They were all traders, just like in China. And from trading mentality to go into a manufacturing mentality is very hard. Very few large Indian corporations with $40–50 billion of revenue have no R&D, world-class R&D. Even in pharma, where we can do quite well. So think about large corporations in India and how much reputation they have. Let's say the Tata Group, the Birla Group, which are all $40–50 billion. Tata is about 100 billion. And similarly, the newer groups, IT services companies, whatever they are, each one is about 10 billion. All of them have very few R&D centers.
Thank you,
Similarly,
Ken.
so that's what really what I'm sorry.
No,
So
no,
that's
no,
what
no.
I think. So that's very
one.
important to understand to create innovation. So, okay.
Thank you. No, I didn't mean to interrupt, but thank you so very much to all the panelists. It's been wonderful, and we have tons and tons of questions. If I were to take all of them, we would be sitting here all day. But I know each one of you has engagements and places to go and enlighten the world. So I would now invite Mr. Rabinder Sachdev, President of Imagine India, to conclude, to give the summary of this session today, so people can take all the good takeaways from today's session. And we will definitely have another such session pretty soon, so we can take the other questions and get more insights into this new education. Thank you. Mr. Sachdev, please.
Thank you so much, Gurdeep, and thank you so much, the Indian American International Chamber of Commerce. And of course, thank you so much, this panel. This panel came around, when Gurdeep suggested, and she reached out and connected with Dr. Sheth and Behrooz and Sanjay. And we thought, let's do a discussion at a high level, and we really wanted to kind of stimulate the mind. So, though I'm supposed to summarize, I don't think I can summarize anything in this because there's so much what has been said by each of the panelists. There's a world and a wealth of knowledge in each of the points there. So I think the best learning would have been perhaps for those who were in the audiences and listening to this conversation. So they would have, I think, probably enjoyed it the most. And I do think the video of this would be put up and shared with others so that more folks can enjoy the entirety of this conversation.
We will be doing that.
I'll just put a few basic points, and I'll also not be able to do justice to what the highlights were, but still, one is that online is not a dichotomy, it's not an either or, it's not a zero-sum game between online and physical. That was a critical learning at a high level, because the audiences for this webinar, we hope, are high level or leaders in the field of education in the United States or India. So that's a big one, which all understand, but is to be repeated. Another interesting point was that why do you think that students come to a university and then leave? Why not look at as an alum? The point of alum, which I think Jack Sheth mentioned, that why not it be maybe the universities charge more, but redefine the total learning as a lifelong learning. You are a continuous learning student in any case, which we are. Behrooz's point about coaching, absolutely, coaching and the physical connect with the students and inspiring them to be there. Okay, fine, now you're in this middle class, which brings the inspiration, and that's the dream of all parents and the children and the students themselves. And we got into discussing some fine nuances of what makes an effective coach, which also includes the faculty and the diverse coaching styles of faculty, the diverse learning styles of the students, and the best fit to be enabled there. Train the mind. I think the key is all of us educators here are talking about how to train the mind, which Sanjay Sharma also started out when he talked about the prefrontal cortex and the right brain, left brain, and integrated learning. I think that is the key, which has been the underlying refrain in this entire conversation. How do we train the mind for something 50 years hence, which we don't know? So that is the challenge and the pursuit which educators, as Jack said, Sanjay Sharma, Behrus are, working on and implementing, and very successfully. And we are really thankful to you for your, thoughts, and your students, of course, will be very much thankful to you. I think, I'm sure. The know-how, know-why, policies and education. I think these are a few points. Lastly, I'll say a bit of humility. And probably that is something which, a bit of humility and curiosity. I mean,
the
we
three
have to be
C's. The three C's. Yeah.
fair enough. Thank you. It has to be a lifelong curiosity, a lifelong humility. And I think which also comes out, teachers have compassion, because as you know, it's the compassion from the teachers which comes to the students, and which students, they get the vibes. As humans, we get the vibes. So the more compassion flows from the teacher, the more I think the students kind of relate to it. So humility, compassion, curiosity, learn more, connecting the dots. So much more for us all to connect the dots. I will leave it there. Thank you so much, Dr. Gurdeep, and thank you so much. A wonderful panel. It's been a pleasure learning in this panel. Thank you so much, IAIC. Thank you so much, Mr. Appan Menon. Thank you so much, our Narendra ji. Thank you so much, Vishnu ji, our coordinator and host. Back to you, Gurdeep.
Thank you, Rabinder, for summarizing it so well. I couldn't have done it any better. And thank you once again, Professor Jagdish Sheth. I know I approached you a couple months ago. I was in the formative stage at that time, and you inspired me. You held my hand and took me all of the way, and suggested the panel, and we went from there. And I cannot thank you enough for helping us all the way. And thank you for joining us, Professor Beru Sethna, Professor Sanjay Imani. We have learned so much from you, and I'm sure our audience have learned so much. And I'm looking forward to having another session, another webinar like this, because the questions are like intense, maybe, that we haven't answered. I feel bad for them, but we don't have the time. And we are missing our president, Mr. KV Kumar. He wanted to be here, and I wish he was, but he had a very important engagement with the federal government, so he had to leave. But he will be joining us probably for the next such seminar, and he will be watching this on YouTube. Thank you so much from Mr. Appan for joining us and filling up, and we really appreciate your presence here. You're very humble but very knowledgeable and very inspirational person for us. Thank you, Vishnu. Thank you, Rabinder. Over to you, Vishnu, to take it from here. Thank you.
I now welcome Narendra Shah, Executive Director, IAICC Southeast Atlanta Regional Chapter, to deliver the word of thanks.
Your mic is off. Your mic is off.
Thank you, Vishnuji. Good afternoon, all dear friends. Honorable IAICC Executive Board Chairman, Mr. Appan Menon, all our world-class speakers, Dr. Jagdish Sheth, Dr. Beru Setna, Dr. Sanjay Sharma, our National Communications Director, Dr. Vishnu Ji, IAICC Moderator, Dr. Gurdeep Chawla, Mr. Rabinder Sachdev of Image India, all our valued IAICC member and Image India members. It is my proud privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion of this great successful webinar. I, Narendra Shah, on behalf of Indian American International Chambers of Commerce and Image India, and all those present in this webinar here together, and on my behalf, extend a hearty vote of thanks to all the speakers for your excellent speeches and very deep insight on impact of digital technology on higher education today. All those who contributed to this live webinar, thank you for your excellent work. It is fair to conclude that this live webinar was a great success. So many people have contributed in so many ways to turn this event into a smooth running webinar with very many interesting speeches and a very good atmosphere for discussions and networking. I thank Dr. Vishnu, our own passionate Chamber's National Communication Director, for the delightful introductions. I wholeheartedly thank our own illustrious Executive Board Chairman, Mr. Apan Menon, for his inspirational opening remarks. Thank you to our own Dr. Gurdeep Chawla, who organized this insightful live webinar along with Dr. Jagdish Seth and I. I must mention our deep appreciation for our own beloved Dr. Jagdish Seth, well known as Dr. Jag, and for his valuable talk and guidance, and also bringing great panel of world-class speakers. I want to take this great opportunity to recognize our IAICC founding father, Mr. K.V. Kumar, who could not be present today, for his grand efforts towards establishing this chamber before 30 years with an amazing overview for spending more than $400,000 of his own personal money. Mr. K.V. Kumar had contributed so many things for betterment of Indian Americans and Indians for more than 40 years, since President Reagan to President Trump in USA and Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi to Prime Minister Narendra Modi in India, with direct influential connections with them. I would like to thank our Chamber's national team members, Dr. Vishnu Jairaman, National Communications Director, Mr. Nagaraj Reddy, National Executive Director, and Ms. Mary Reynolds, Mr. KV Special Assistant, for their excellent help as well. I want to give a very big special thanks to our own IAICC Southeast Atlanta Regional Chamber President, Mr. Kumar Aladi, who is amazing with his excellent IT technical team, including Mr. Anish Goli, Mr. Rohit Sukumar, Mr. Siddip Neduri, for setting up and managing today's live webinar link. I would like to acknowledge all those who have given their valuable time and are present here today, and your treasured contribution in one way or another to our seminar and both our grand organization. We all are inspired by your great words, Mr. Apan Menon, and all our three amazing speakers. Mr. Jagdish Seth, I am also from Kutch. I was born in Kutch. Dr. Benu Setna, I am also a Bombayite. I am a proud Mumbaikar. And Dr. Sanjay Sharma, I also met my wife in my college. She had come
So you're forming with somebody.
So we all have some similarities. Who gave us a lot of new wonderful insight today about virtual education and things to come. We all highly appreciate your enormous efforts, great inputs, fruitful discussions, meaningful interactions, and effective contributions, and greatly acknowledge them. We thank you all for being here with us this afternoon. It's been a great pleasure. Have a great day. Thank you very much. And I want to end with one poem of William Wordsworth. William Wordsworth used to say, I have 6 teachers. I have 6 teachers. Their names are what, where, when, how, why, whom. And our 3 excellent world-class speakers covered all these 6 teachers: what, where, when, how, why, whom. Excellently. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Shah. With this, we have come to an end of today's webinar. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.